Hi, and welcome to this new video about Semantic Kernel, in which I'm going to specify a little bit more how you can choose the model you are actually using when you call a large language model. And this is important because you can configure more than one model, and since models have different capability of reasoning and has different cost, it is most important in your application to choose the right model on the right situation to avoid spending too much or to avoid giving not so good result to the user. As you can see in this configuration, we are actually configuring two different versions of the OpenAI Azure API. So we are using the GPT-4o endpoint and GPT 3.5 endpoint. And I know that we are going to wait for the new GPT-4o mini, but the example is old, so it still uses GPT 3.5. But the concept is, after I configured both of this model, how can I decide which model to call? And unsurprisingly, if you look at the configuration, you have a parameter called model ID that allows you to give an ID to the model. So you can refer to that ID in the configuration to choose which is the model you want to use when you call your large language model. Now, in this cell, you are looking at an important fact. After you call your large language model directly with invoke prompt async, so you are not using anything except directly passing the prompt, a string prompt to kernel, to semantic kernel, you have in result something that is a function result. It's a complex object that can be simply called with a toString to get the string representation of the answer of the large language model. But you can see from this example that you can still use the metadata property to look at some metadata. And we have, in the situation when you are using OpenAI as an example, you have a metadata called usage that gives you the number of tokens you used for this call. And also, if you see at the end of the block, you have the get value method that allows you to get the special result contained into the result object. Because since you are calling this with OpenAI, because you configure OpenAI in semantic kernel, in return, you expect to have OpenAI chat message content that allows you to access to the real response with all the detail of your OpenAI call. And in this example, I am simply dumping the model ID to certify which is the model that we are using when we call the large language model. So let's run the example. And as you can see, we have logging enabled. So you have a bunch of logging that show everything about the call. And at the end, you can see that I'm able to dump the usage total because I take this information from the metadata. And the model uses GPT 3.35 underscore 2. And this is the ID of the model deployed in my Azure account. So actually, if I configure the kernel memory with this configuration, so I configure GPT-4o and then GPT 3.5, and this is the name of the deployment, actually you're using the latest one configured if you're not specifying anything. But you now know from the previous example that you can use a kernel arguments parameter that allows you to configure how you want to call the large language model through semantic kernel. So in this example, I'm going to simply use the execution settings. And since I know that I'm calling the OpenAI version of the API, I'm using the OpenAI prompt execution setting. And as you can see, I specify the number of tokens, the temperature, but also I can specify the model ID. That is the same model ID I used in the configuration. So now I'm doing the very same example. So I'm calling the large language model through the invoke prompt async, and I'm simply dumping the model use. And now if I press play, I'm expecting the model to have my usage, but the model used now is GPT-4o. And in this model, you learned how to choose the model you want to call. So having more than one model configured, it's important because model has a different cost and has a different capability. So you should always use the best model that is a good balance between how much money are you spending with the API and how good is the answer for the user. So it's not advisable to start and using always the highest capable model, because you can have a too much spending situation. And thanks to Semantic Kernel, it is very simple because you can use kernel arguments object to choose to pass parameter to each call, and you can register more than one chat model. So you can register GPT-4o, you can register GPT 3.5, you can also register other models. And then for each invocation, you can use the model ID to choose the model ID you specified during configuration. So remember, the last registration you made is the default model you're going to use. You give unique model ID, and you are actually changing the model you're using during each call. So you can balance between how good the model is and how you are spending, how much you are spending. I hope you like this video. If you like it, do not forget to subscribe to this channel, and I'm waiting you for the next one. Bye bye.